Hello and welcome to the UFOcast as Captain Scarlet. This is episode 5. We're looking at Manhunt. So unlike last week, there's a huge variance in where this appears on the Blu-ray versus the DVD. These are very similar. This is number 5 on the Blu-ray, 4 on the DVD order, 10 on the weird VHS order, which is largely nuts. And it's very clear that this is an early episode. This should be an early episode because we have this reference to the fact that Captain Black is at large. Although we, the viewer, are aware of his machinations behind the scenes in the first few episodes, this is the first time that Spectrum is aware that he's still at large, and the episode centres around him. And it's interesting in that there isn't the usual Mysteron threat, just a repetition of what we had in the first episode, where they're like, we will take our revenge and it will be slow and all that jazz. But no specific target this week, because this episode is all about Captain Black has irradiated himself and is therefore detectable, and the manhunt is on to find him. And this is definitely one that I remember from being a kid, quite enjoying, and certainly that suspense first time around watching it of, the Mysterons have made this mistake. Will they catch Captain Black? Of the 5 thus far, I've basically said that I thought the Mysterons, Big Ben Strikes Again and Manhunt were pretty good. And Big Ben Strikes Again and Manhunt have both fallen in my estimation slightly on a rewatch, which is a shame. To be fair, there's lots of positives about this one, and I don't know whether part of this is just an artifact of the Blu-ray stuff, but the stuff shot at night at the Culver Centre just works better visually. The daytime stuff is just visually less interesting, but it still looks great on Blu-ray. I'm amazed at how well the model work stands up, and it's a good idea. The idea of the Mysterons have made a mistake. The idea that there is actually an ongoing storyline, although we've kind of said that you can watch the episodes in any order, pretty much. There is an ongoing storyline. This is still early days for fighting the Mysterons, and when we're building those relationships, we've got the fact that Captain Blue clearly has a relationship with Symphony. Captain Blue and Captain Scarlet have a friendship. Colonel White is developing his character of this sort of authoritarian leader who values initiative, but only as far as it doesn't interfere with discipline. I mean, obviously, Symphony Angel is totally wrong in going down to apprehend Captain Black on her own. That is definitely true. Lieutenant Green chomping at the bit to get down and get involved is fun. So from a character point of view, I guess it's a fun episode. But the plot itself is very slight. You have this sort of idea that they can close in and find him with their Geiger counters, and you just wonder why they waste so much time with Captain Scarlet and Captain Blue faffing around until they've got a reading, if that makes sense. Though it does give the opportunity for the brutality of the show to come through. I think this is the first properly brutal moment of the series, with Captain Black killing the filling station attendant. I guess for me, watching this episode this time round really brought home the weird mixture of tone, because they still feel the need to sort of over-explain what's gone on at the end of the episode, which I feel shows that they're kind of aiming at a kiddie audience, though I think there's a sense in which they're kind of talking down to the kids, actually, which is a bit frustrating. But equally, they're not beyond a guy getting clubbed over the back of the head with a gun butt and blood being visible on the puppet's head, and then a car mechanic being crushed to death in his own car lift, and then him being shot down by Captain Scarlet in typical brutal fashion. I mean, rightly so, he was going to kill them. He might win a prize for shortest-lived Mysteron agent. Great to see Captain Ochre about, great to see Captain Grey about. He doesn't get much to do, but great to see them working together as a team. But altogether, a little bit too slight, a little bit of a disappointment, I feel, this time round, which is a shame, because I used to really like this episode. And as I say, I hope I don't end up kind of saying this about a lot of them. I'm kind of looking at the episodes to come and I'm like, no, there's some pretty good ones in there. So we will see as we go through this rewatch.
And now it's time for this week's Spectrum Agent Report from sometime UFO co-host Michael, better known as the host of the Tin Dog podcast. And in this, he refers to the previous one that he's done, which, yes, he recorded it in the past, but you won't be hearing it for another couple of weeks.
Hello, Michael here. Talking about Manhunt. What am I supposed to say about this? Well, at least this story makes more sense than the last one I spoke about. There is some sort of narrative structure. I mean, at least the solution makes sense. Spectrum finally know that Captain Black has, that voice and is clearly a Mistron agent. Why they didn't suspect him is beyond me, and they did suspect Scarlet. Leave it there. The important bit for me is that there's a couple of questions that are asked here which are never really gone into. Colonel White's assistant, the equivalent of, Keith, he's sat there answering the phones and he asks twice if he can go and help. Now, the rule of three narratively means that at some point he should have gone down and helped and in fact solved the whole problem. But what actually happens in this narrative is the Colonel tells him to stop asking and just get on with his work. It's weird. But more importantly than that is nobody bothers to find out what Captain Black was actually doing at the Atomic Research Facility. The camera pans past this fantastically gorgeous model, and as I'm watching it I'm thinking, that's going to look brilliant when they blow that up. And they don't. And for me, the thing that stays with me afterwards is the really weird aftertaste of she can't drive an SPV. Now, I know they're driven backwards. That's just stupid. It always has been. Actually, no, it's really clever, but let's not go down that road. We can discuss that at a different time. The payoff for the episode is, women drivers. They're driving angels. That's ridiculous as a storyline. It's ridiculous as a payoff. It's ridiculous as an end of episode gag. So it's not as good as it could have been, which keeps happening with Captain Scarlet. But you know what? It's still not a bad episode. There's a lot of lovely vehicles. And that business with the ever-heightening thing that crushes the guy in the garage in the ceiling, that's not how they work. I mean, how far down into the ground does that piston go? What would be the physical point of having a piece of kit that would do that? Ever? I know it makes narrative excitement, moment, but it just makes no sense. Like a lot of things around here, if you look at them too closely, you go, I can see what you were doing, but no. It's probably not the most enthusiastic of reviews, but I've only got a couple of minutes. So with that, I'll fade away. Be seeing you.
If you'd like to be a Spectrum agent for a future episode, please head over to ufocast.co.uk/captain to sign up.
So let's go through our usual things. New Mistron powers. The one I've got down here. I mean, I wonder whether this section of the podcast will be a law of diminishing returns. How many new powers can the Mistrons have? But I've put down omniscience question mark. I mean, clearly the Mistrons aren't omniscient. Though I suppose if they are, then again it's the whole they allow Spectrum to win now and then. But the whole Captain Black, there's a roadblock ahead of you, turn off. And the Mistrons are on Mars, and they somehow know what's going on a few hundred yards down the road from Captain Black. That's some very powerful reconnaissance. Unless the Mistrons are a presence that is closer now, for whatever reason. So I'm going to say that's a new facet of the Mistrons that we are aware of in this episode. Mistron still at large, of course. Captain Black is still at large. The only other Mistron agent very quickly meets his demise in this episode. Is it a win or a loss? Well, the Mistrons don't have a particular target in this episode, so it's difficult to say whether they've won or not. And Spectrum's target of catching Captain Black, obviously they fail at that. So it's probably a draw, but more of a loss for Spectrum than it is for the Mistrons. Watch out for the Mistron Puppet Gallery on the website ufocast.co.uk for the latest updates to that. And join us next week for episode 6, Operation Time.